This video is an overview of a larger project I took on recently. The goal was to fix up a TEAC Model C-3. This is a 3-head deck that I got from Japan, originally made in 1980. It looks great, and when it's tuned up, it sounds awesome. The champagne front looks really nice. I think it's classy, and hard to beat those metal-looking reels, these specialty tapes from back in the day as well. So opening up this thing, I realized I was in for a bit of a project, but I enjoy this kind of stuff. Getting into the tape mechanism was the most important part. The tape mechanism is responsible for moving the cassette tape, play, record, fast forward, rewind. And I knew that I would have some old belts or pulleys to replace. Belts are like the rubber bands, and these are the things that, of course, degrade and tend to disintegrate over time. And they leave black residue, gunk, and goo on motor pulleys and other bits of the mechanism. So once I got this thing opened up, I indeed was able to see, oh boy, yeah, that motor pulley is pretty dirty, but it cleaned up pretty nicely with isopropyl alcohol, kind of like rubbing alcohol. Once I got through that, I started taking apart more of the assembly. So the flywheel is the large weight that helps keep things stable while the machine is running. Remove the original pulley band or belt, and then tried to get as much of the gunk that left from the belt on the original flywheel. It was still looking pretty rough, but more on that later. I actually ended up doing a number of belt swaps. I had 3 or 4 different types of belts to try, and it was nice to have a variety just to see which one might perform best. It was also fun looking at the assembly, the tape play assembly, and seeing the various strings and springs and things that made things work. So the first belt I tried was actually too tight. It was a little bit short, and it prevented the take-up spool from running, so I had to swap it out. I also looked at switching out the Capstan pinch roller. This is the little tire that maintains pressure between the capstan and helps drive the tape. After I put everything in and tested it, it did seem like the deck was working nicely, but I was hearing this squeaking on occasion, so I thought, well, that's no good. So I ended up going back to the original pinch roller tire. I swapped out another belt, and I found recommendation is to go with a belt that's wide but also thin.
That should be ready to come out.
Eventually, I decided to take the motor and take the motor apart and pull off the PCB, the little circuit board that is responsible for the speed control. I'm told this is an FG style motor. It has a feedback loop so that it can monitor speed and ideally be more stable in terms of the RPM. Taking apart the motor itself, I noticed that the commutator was rather dirty, had corrosion or oxidation from use. So I did a couple things that I wouldn't recommend you do this, but I put it on a rotary tool. I tried a various number of light abrasives, and eventually I was able to clean up that part of the commutator quite nicely. So getting some of that original shine back, and also seeing that it maintained the original texture. So that felt pretty good to see. One of the difficult things was the brushes. Now these are the things that provide the voltage to the motor through the commutator, and these are very fine. And so once again, I got the rotary tool out. I did some things maybe I shouldn't be doing, but basically I was just trying to find a way to safely rub and get some of that oxidation off the brushes. I ended up using little pipe cleaners and IPA and all sorts of things to try to clean those things up. And eventually I got them to a decent place. So then I went back to the motor PCB and I basically practiced my soldering skills, desoldering and resoldering things. I decided to recap the board that was just replacing the original capacitors with new capacitors. I think I left all of the other components, didn't bother swapping anything else out. And then got the motor working again. It was really nice to see that, yep, I didn't break it. And just applying the voltage, checking the FG circuit with the multimeter, I was able to see that, okay, it does seem to be generating a signal and responding to the motor running. So that was good. I was also able to confirm that, yes, I can adjust the motor speed, and the FG loop, it's a magnetic loop, responds accordingly. So it seemed like the motor was working. This was one assembly shot I wanted to show. It's not often, at least in my experience, that you get a C-clamp or an E-clamp to fit nicely in place without flying away. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. Now this is the Capstan flywheel. This is the weight that spins and drives the whole tape mechanism. It seemed a little tarnished, so I got this Flitz polish, and wow, did that ever make a difference. So I went to town on that thing, and boy, it really seemed like that cleaned up. And I didn't want to make it too smooth, but the Capstan belt I'm going to show here runs on that thing, so I wanted to make sure that it was at least tidy and could maintain friction. Once I got the motor and everything back together, then I got a little toothpick and cut the end off, dental floss pick, and then adjusted the motor speed so that a 3 kilohertz test tape would run at 3 kilohertz. I swapped in another belt. This was a fairly wide and thin Capstan belt, and I wanted to see how that one had performed. There was yet a 4th belt that I ended up using, and there's a bit of a dance to swapping belts and then adjusting the pulleys so that things line up. So I always took time to look carefully to see where does the belt sit on the pulley. Toward the end, again, here I am adjusting the speed of the motor and trying to target 3 kilohertz. And then in software, I'm also looking at the wow and flutter from the deck. So at the end of this project, I got pretty close to the spec. And then the last thing I did was adjust the bias and EQ. And it was really nice to be able to compare the source device music I was playing versus what was coming off tape. So here's a real-time demonstration of how tape can sound. It can sound pretty good when you calibrate it correctly. It was nice to hear. One thing that I still have yet to figure out, I may not be able to fix, was this scratch or mark or stress fracture point that was on the plastic that sat in front of the VU meters. If anybody knows what that is, pointers are welcome.
Make much of a F.
I also cleaned up the knobs that sit on the front, just a little bit of polish, not too much because I didn't want to take the lettering off. And then reassembly was fairly straightforward. I think this is just a great looking deck, and it sounds really good. It supports Dolby NR, just the basic Dolby. It doesn't have the DBX. That was on the C3. That was on a different C3 that followed. I think it's the C3 RX. But yeah, great looking unit, great sounding unit. Very happy to get this one fixed up and performing nicely.